who then is Jesus? We've been working on this passage and reading it for 4 weeks now. Well, the first time, we kind of focused on Jesus being asleep. And what do you do when your leaders are asleep? And then we focused on the fear and the panic of the disciples. And then we focused on what are some of the storms of our lives. So now, in this one, I want to focus on who is this Jesus? Not only back then, but how do we speak about him today? Because remember, this passage is written about 30 years after Jesus' death, right? It's written by the early disciples to be a source of comfort and reassurance and challenge to the communities that were growing up believing in this message that Jesus had. Right? So it's 30 years later, and they're remembering the gist, perhaps, of what Jesus did. They're not recording a precise thing, a precise event. They are taking Jesus' message as the kernel of it and applying it to this early community that's really under siege. They're starting to be recognized as having a different approach to life. People are being drawn to it. And so the synagogue movement and the Roman authorities are saying, hey, what is this new movement that's happening? Who are these people? Who's their leader? Where is their inspiration coming from? Who is this Jesus that these early people could find comfort in the storms of their lives, who could find courage in the face of opposition, increasing opposition, and persecution? So they talk about him as the one that even the wind and the sea obey. In our day and age, we don't have a view of Jesus as kind of this supernaturally powerful person who can pull the strings on the weather, that can pull the strings on the happenings of everyday life, because we've had 2,000 years to say, if Jesus can pull the strings, why doesn't he? If Jesus can prevent a fire and be kind of inject different situations into everyday life, why didn't he do something to help those 7 kids in Halifax? Right? Surely that would have been a time. We've had 2,000 years of saying, you know what? We don't believe, or it doesn't ring true for us, that the wind and the sea obey him. Now that's how that early group talked about it. And it was comforting to them. But how do we talk about Jesus today? What do you say about Jesus in your everyday conversation? And you can't say, well, I just try to avoid the subject. Who then is this that what happens? Would you take a moment? Take about 3 or 4 moments and talk to the people around you. What do you say about Jesus nowadays? How do you speak about who he is? How do you describe him? Jesus is who? Now, if you don't want to talk about that, I'm feeling the stillness in the congregation. Then talk about how does your faith help you to face the storms in your life? You can talk about either thing, but who do you say that Jesus is? How do you describe him today? Or how do you describe that experience that gives you confidence and calm in the midst of the storms of your life? Time is yours. Okay, good folks, if you can finish up. So, what are some of the ways that you describe Jesus? Prophet. Messenger. Sorry. Say it again. Big brother. Metaphor. Teacher. Love. An example to live by. Lord.
I heard somebody ask this, said he was asked on a radio show, describe Jesus in 5 words or less, and he said a peasant with an attitude.
So he was asked to describe Jesus in 5 words or less, a peasant with an attitude. Okay?
Servant, but he said, I am among you as one of servants.
A servant.
Spark of divine light.
Spark of divine light. Liberator. A window. Rebel. Sorry? Somebody here? Key? Okay. Spirit? Something inside you. A connector? Okay. A friend. So, that's a great picture of Jesus. And that's why it takes a community to kind of understand about who Jesus is, because we can each come from a different perspective. There are people for whom Jesus became the Lord of their life. And they focus and center their lives around this Jesus as their way to connect with God. There are others who look at God look at Jesus as a lens, as a messenger, as someone who, with an attitude, who lets them see God. There are those who see Jesus as the one who, through his stories and his philosophy and his ability to connect with God, see him as a model for our living. One of the wonderful things about the United Church of Canada is we do not have a statement of concrete factual belief that we have to memorize and say, this is who we believe Jesus is. So I want to end this because, of course, we don't want to be late for our annual meeting. But you might say, what does this have to do with our annual meeting? Well, who we believe that Jesus is got to be the groundwork, the basis, the inspiration for what we do as a congregation. Jesus is actually our only uniqueness. He's the only thing that other service clubs and other organizations don't have. So who we believe he is will be shown in the kind of work that we do together and in the causes that we support. So that's the connection to the annual meeting. I want to read to you from Song of Faith, which is a poetic statement that helps us to think quite broadly about Jesus. Who then is this? The Song of Faith says, we sing of Jesus, a Jew, born to a woman in poverty, in a time of social upheaval and political oppression. He knew human joy and sorrow. So filled with the Holy Spirit was he, that in him people experienced the presence of God among them. We sing praise to God incarnate. Jesus announced the coming of God's reign, a commonwealth not of dominion, but a commonwealth of peace, justice, and reconciliation. He healed the sick and fed the hungry. He forgave sins and freed those held captive by all manner of demonic powers. He crossed barriers of race, class, culture, and gender. He preached and practiced unconditional love, love of God, love of neighbor, love of friend, love of enemy. And he commanded his followers to love one another as he had loved them. All the words and statements that you said are encapsulated in that. It is, I think, a lifelong journey to just imagine our relationship with this Jewish peasant. And it changes at the various times of our lives. So, there's no need for me to go on today, because otherwise I'll try to say everything, and that's not good. One of the things that I think is true is that the stories and the teachings and the attitudes that Jesus brought have somehow been incorporated within us. And even when we don't know we have them, they come out at the strangest time because they're part of our soul. Christ within us hidden.